Welcome back, beloved English students of Evergreen. This is Mr. Hebert. This is video number 4, and hopefully you're taking really good notes and you are doing these in order. There is a reason, a method to my madness, as Hamlet once quoted, or it's from the play Hamlet. Okay, so we've talked about setting, and we've talked about protagonist and antagonist, and hopefully expanded those definitions a little bit more for you beyond the good guy, bad guy. And related to that, of course, we talked about conflict, and we reviewed Aristotle's 4 main types of conflicts and different ways that those can be adjusted and overlap. And now we're going to talk about character types. Now, character types is different from protagonist and antagonist. It depends on how developed their personalities are. And another really important part, you can underline this, how much they change throughout the plot. So how much do they change? How much are they affected by the conflict that they go through? Now, both protagonists and antagonists could go through change. But it's not about protagonist or antagonist. It's about how much they change and how well developed their personalities are. So this is broken down into a few different categories, one of 3, I should say. So characters are round or dynamic. So these are the characters that show great complexity. They will go through change. They will be affected by the conflict. Now that could be a positive change. It could be a negative change, but they do go through change. Well developed in their personality. Not physical change, but values and personality traits and worldview. And those that don't change or are very one-dimensional, not very developed, but major characters, keep that in mind, flat or static characters. So they show very little change, if any, throughout the story, and they pretty much retain the same kind of personality traits or values. We do see a lot of antagonist characters that are flat or static, but don't immediately assume that antagonists are automatically flat or static. You have to look at how much they change. And then a third type that we see in stories are these characters that we'll refer to as agents. And we're not talking about Secret Service or FBI or anything like that. These are characters, virtually no character development at all. They are minor characters, but they are extremely important because they're there to keep the plot moving. They're there to bring out information for the major characters. They are instruments of the plot. That's why we call them agents. They're kind of like tools of the plot. So some examples of round or dynamic characters that we may see. Well, we talked about the Beast in Beauty and the Beast. He very much is a character who's affected by the conflict that he goes through. Hamlet is very much a dynamic character, having going through all of that philosophical journeys and the things that happen with him, with Ophelia and with his uncle and his mom. He is definitely a character that goes through change. Even Tony Stark in the Iron Man movies, if we kind of see him all together, the Iron Man movies, we see that he goes from this arrogant, wealthy guy, he's just sort of using money for his own pleasure, to a little bit more self-sacrificing as he goes through these different conflicts. The 3 Little Pigs, are they round or dynamic characters? Or are they flat or static characters? Now you might say, oh, they're pigs, so they're round. Ha, ha, ha. No. Do they really go through change? They start off as having certain values, and they pretty much end with the same values. They aren't really affected by the conflict. There's no real evidence that the 3rd pig is really affected because he started off thinking this is the way to get along in the world, and his actions are just reaffirmed. He worked hard, and he did it the best that he could, and he was rewarded for that. So I don't think he goes through a lot of change. So he is a flat, static character. The Big Bad Wolf, does he really show a lot of great complexity? No. Of course, that's something you see a lot in kids' stories. They keep it more simple. More complex characters would be harder for kids to understand. So these characters are very flat and very static. Other characters that are flat or static in other works of literature or movies, Atticus Finch is a major character in To Kill a Mockingbird, but he is a flat, static character. Doesn't mean he's not interesting. He definitely is well developed in his personality, but he does not go through change. So in many ways, he is a static character. He holds on to those values. Scar in The Lion King is another example of a static character. He does not really get affected by the conflict in a way that changes his personality. So it does not undergo important change in that story. And then you have agents. Agents are there to just keep things moving. In The Three Little Pigs, the mom is the agent. She shows up at the beginning and she shows up at the end. Mom shows up at the beginning to get the pigs out into the forest and initiate that story and that conflict. She's the one that says, go out there and seek your fortunes. Then she just shows up again at the end to clarify for the reader what the theme of The Three Little Pigs is. So she has less character development than even the pigs that get eaten, but she is an important tool, an agent for those characters to get out into the forest and have that conflict take place. In Shakespeare, we see messengers a lot, and they are agents. For example, in Romeo and Juliet, we have a messenger near the beginning of the story. He's delivering an invitation list for the Capulet party. And the problem is he's given the list and he's supposed to go out and tell people they're invited to this party, but he's not really literate. He's kind of a dunce head, you know. And so he says, oh, I can't really read this, but these guys over here that are walking along on the street, maybe they can help me. So he calls these guys over and he says, hey, can you help me read this? I need to find out who these people are so I can invite them to my master Capulet's party. Well, the people he calls over, he doesn't know, are Romeo and Benvolio, and they're Montagues, and the Capulets and the Montagues are like fighting in the street. Their families are feuding with each other. So Romeo looks at the list and says, yeah, I can help you out. And he sees a name on the list. Her name is Rosaline. And Rosaline's the girl that he's in love with at the beginning of the play. And he sees that Rosaline is going to be at the party. And he says, oh, I don't care if it's my father's enemy. I want to go to the party so I can see Rosaline from afar and admire her from afar. And he sneaks into the party. And he finally meets Juliet at this party. And of course, the story gets more complicated from there. But had it not been for this messenger, for this agent, he would not have found out about this party, and he would not have gotten there, and this conflict would not have ensued. So that's a good example of an agent. Yes, they're staring at you because we're talking about point of view. Yes, I see you. Point of view, a very important tool to think about as you go through looking at stories. This is key in developing the story because if the point of view is told from one person's point of view versus another person's point of view, it's going to change the story. So we might use the word narrator, and it pretty much focuses on three main categories. There is a fourth that is out there, but you don't really see it a lot in literature, and if you remind me on Thursday, I can ask you about that. Okay, so the first is first person point of view. So this is a story that's told from the point of view someone in that world. They are bound by the rules of that story. They're bound by the rules of that setting. You'll see I and me, my, we, our, these first-person point of view, or first-person pronouns. This is effective in that, well, the effect that it has is that the story is told through the eyes of this character, which means that the audience only knows what this character knows, only experiences what this character experiences. The only thoughts and feelings that we experience are the thoughts and feelings of this character. Some examples of first-person point of view are Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. That's told through Huck Finn's point of view. Moby Dick is first-person point of view. Night is a non-fiction biography. Elie Wiesel's Tale of the Holocaust. That is told in first-person point of view. Farewell to Manzanar, which is about the Japanese internment camps. To Kill a Mockingbird is also told in first-person point of view through the eyes of Scout Finch, the daughter of Atticus Finch. So basically what that means is, in To Kill a Mockingbird, we only know what Scout knows. If she isn't there to experience an event, we're not there to experience that event. She only knows about it if someone tells her about it. So this is a device that authors do not pick lightly. They think very, very deeply about this, in that it will determine the overall effect and themes of the story. Then we have third-person omniscient. Third-person omniscient is a very common use. It's going to use third-person pronouns. This is told by someone who's not in the story. So they're not bound by the rules of the setting. They will give us the feelings and thoughts of different characters. If we have characters in different locations, then we can jump around and find out what's happening with them. Lord of the Rings is told in third-person omniscient. A Tale of Two Cities is told in third-person omniscient. And then we have third-person limited. Third-person limited is going to use third-person pronouns, but it only will center, or usually only center, on one character's experience or thoughts. For example, The Good Earth and Fahrenheit 451, these are famous classic novels, they are told in third-person limited. If we get to the short story of The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, that is also told in third-person limited. So we're only going to get one character's experience and thoughts, but it's only going to use third-person pronouns. And there are, of course, ways that people will experiment with these points of view. Interesting uses of first-person point of view, for example, A Series of Unfortunate Events has a very, very unique way of using first-person and third-person together. It starts off as first-person, but it's third-person, and then it turns out that the narrator is actually a part of the story as you go through the series. Frankenstein, the original book by Mary Shelley, is a wonderful book that uses point of view in a very interesting way. It will switch from first-person point of view in different chapters. So one chapter may be told from Victor Frankenstein's point of view, and then there's another chapter that's told from the creature's point of view. Dracula uses a similar technique as well. The original book by Bram Stoker uses first-person point of view in interesting ways. So a point of view example of first person. I remember standing in that small, dimly lit room. There was no air circulation. Each breath I took felt like a mass of congealed soup slipping into my lungs. The ripe smell in the air lingered around, silently mocking and tormenting me with its invisible tendrils of death and decay. My mind forced me to look away, yet my eyes kept gravitating back with an impossible will of their own. Okay, so that is first person. I, my, me. You get the idea. And it says, my mind forced me to look away. So we're getting a little bit into the feelings and the thoughts of this character only, silently mocking and tormenting me. We're getting this feeling, this reaction. First person point of view. Let's look at this example. This would be third person omniscient. So it's all knowing, which means we're going to get feelings and thoughts of different characters. John couldn't believe what he was seeing. He thought the flash of bright red light that streaked across the sky might have been lightning. Rubbing his eyes, he looked a second time and realized, as it flashed in the same place again, that it wasn't. Nor was it a figment of his imagination. Mary, however, thought, this must be the end of the world. So we have John's thoughts and feelings, and we get some insight into Mary's thoughts and feelings, and that's why this is third person omniscient. And then third person limited. This would be the same as third person, except it follows or primarily focuses on only one character's thoughts and feelings. And again, if that character isn't there to experience it, the audience doesn't get any description of it. So notice how the scenario has changed just slightly to be third person limited. John couldn't believe what he was seeing. He thought the flash of bright red light that streaked across the sky might have been lightning. Rubbing his eyes, he looked a second time and realized, as it flashed in the same place again, that it wasn't a figment of his imagination. Mary's eyes widened, worrying John. So that last sentence there takes it from omniscient to limited. We do see what Mary is doing. Mary's eyes are widening, but we know that because John sees her. John sees Mary's eyes are widening. Do we get her feelings and thoughts? No, it's something external that he can observe, and we do get his feelings there, worrying John. So that is third person limited. So we're going to end this video with character types and point of view. Again, if you have any questions, please let me know or write them down on your paper so you can bring them back on Thursday. I'd love to hear some examples that you're thinking about of flat characters or dynamic characters. Is Nemo a dynamic character or a static character? Is Darth Vader a dynamic or static character? Think about characters that you've seen in books and in movies. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And that'll be the end of video 4. I look forward to seeing you guys on Thursday, and make sure you keep an eye out for video 5, hopefully coming out soon. See ya!